Hello, everyone, and welcome to Police Off the Cuff Real Crime Stories. I'm your host, retired NYPD Sergeant Bill Cannon, a 27-year veteran of the NYPD. I hope everyone has had a wonderful 4th of July weekend. Sunday, of course, coming to the end of the weekend. Most places in the U.S. are pretty damn hot this weekend. I'm down south in Florida. It's a little bit hot, but, if you're in Florida in July, what do you expect? Anyway, folks, Tuesday, the trial of at least the jury selection for Alec Baldwin is going to take place. And what can we expect? What do we expect from this trial? There's a lot of different things going on. It's the New York Times has just published a story about how did this case go so far? The prosecution of Alec Baldwin begins on Tuesday, 7/9/24 in Santa Fe, New Mexico. So the shooting occurred, this according to the New York Times, at 1:46 p.m., the day that the Bonanza Creek Ranch, a family-owned West movie set about 20 miles southeast of Santa Fe that had been rented out by Rust, an independent film that Baldwin was both starring in and producing. The bullet he inadvertently fired passed through the upper body of the film's cinematographer, Helena Hutchins, and lodged near the spine of Joel Souza, the director. Souza was taken by ambulance to a hospital in Santa Fe. Hutchins was airlifted to a trauma center in Albuquerque and died a short time later. The district attorney at the time, Carmack-Altwies, was nearing the end of her first year in office. She had been an assistant district attorney specializing in violent crimes when her boss made a bid for Congress. She ran to succeed him in her first foray into electoral politics and won easily, inheriting a jurisdiction that covers 3 counties, Los Alamos, Rio Arriba, and Santa Fe. She's a Democrat in the Democratic district, though the label connotes something very different in New Mexico, a rural hunting state whose voters tend to place a high value on the Second Amendment than it does in, say, New York and California. Anyway, over the next several weeks after the shooting occurred, Carmack-Altwies began considering these options. In many legal circles, especially on 2 coasts, there was an assumption that Baldwin did not commit a crime. It was a terrible tragedy, but there was no indication of any intent to do harm. There would be plenty of civil suits against both him and Rust Movie Productions. In fact, they had already begun, but that didn't have to mean that there wasn't at least the potential for criminal liability, too. Troubling details soon started to emerge about the film set. There were 2 accidental firings of blank rounds before the accidental discharge that killed Hutchins, and several members of the camera crew had resigned the night before the incident, citing, among other things, safety concerns. The first assistant director, who was in charge of safety on a film set, had been fired from another movie 2 years earlier after an accidental gun discharge. The armorer, who maintains control of all the film's firearms, and there were a lot, as this was a Western, was just 24 years old. She'd done the job only once before. So as you could see, there were many problems on this set. And, one of the things is, as much as I believe we've spoken about it, that Alec Baldwin has said that he did not pull the trigger, but as his role as also a producer, he can be held accountable for the safety or lack thereof on the movie set. So we're going to talk about all those things and what it means in this prosecution beginning this Tuesday, July 9th in Santa Fe, New Mexico. So folks, hold on to your seats, hold on to your hats, hold on to your service dog, whatever you need to hold on to. You're about to enter true crime from a police perspective. You're about to enter the off-the-cuff zone.
There has to be some common sense.
Yes, sir. They have the car stopped at 10th and Ranch, Michael Byler.
We still don't know who pulled the trigger.
Some of the people obviously we need to know in regards to this case. Of course, that's Alec Baldwin, who was both the star of the movie and the person who apparently fired the shot that went through the body of Helena Hutchins and into the shoulder of Joel Souza, causing the death of Helena Hutchins and injuring very seriously Joel Souza. So when we analyze the recklessness on this movie set, who was responsible for this recklessness? And why was it allowed to persist? And what are the safety practices that are put into operation on a movie set, especially when there's a great deal of firearms being used on the set? This is Joel Souza. He's the movie director that was shot in the shoulder after the bullet passed through Helena Hutchins and into his shoulder. On the screen now is David Halls, who was an assistant director, who apparently handed the gun to Alec Baldwin and said "cold gun," meaning that it was a safe gun. This picture, of course, is Hannah Gutierrez-Reed, who was since tried and found guilty of criminally negligent homicide. So under those circumstances, this is where Alec Baldwin finds himself going to trial. And this, of course, is Helena Hutchins, the cinematographer who lost her life in regards to this errant shooting, accidental shooting. And this is her husband on the screen, Matt Hutchins, who was interviewed a great deal after, and he apparently settled with Alec Baldwin in a civil case in regards to the shooting of his wife. And usually a civil case is not settled till after the criminal case goes to trial. This was done oppositely. So we don't know why, but it was settled prior to the criminal case. We're going to play a little bit of News Nation here and talking about the start of the trial this Tuesday, July 9th.
Trial against movie star Alec Baldwin is set to get underway in a New Mexico court on Tuesday, where jury selection will begin in the involuntary manslaughter trial against the Rust movie producer and actor. Baldwin was on set wielding the prop gun that fired and killed cinematographer Helena Hutchins. The armorer for the film, Hannah Gutierrez, is facing 18 months in prison after she was found guilty of that same charge for her role in Hutchins' death. Caitlin Becker is here with more. Caitlin, you've been following this from the very beginning. So what does the case look like against Baldwin?
Well, prosecutors are pretty much preparing to paint him as just being erratic, aggressive, and really careless on set. We know that they're going to introduce a lot of video evidence to the jury. What exactly that looks like is unclear. Now, the incident happened during a rehearsal, so I'm not sure if they were rolling on it at that time, but essentially what they're trying to say is that he was kind of willy-nilly with the weapons on set. So I think they're going to have quite a bit of evidence to try to convince the jury of that when they ultimately sit down. And basically what they're saying is he also didn't attend any weapons training that was sort of mandatory. So they're really trying to look at him and saying he wasn't sort of taking responsibility for this. And to be clear, he's not being charged necessarily as the guy who fired the gun. It's also because he's a producer on the film. So the safety measures on set, they're saying, was one of his responsibilities. That was under his purview to make sure that the set was safe and sound.
So let's break this down. What is Alec Baldwin facing if he is indeed found guilty?
So he and the armorer, Hannah Gutierrez-Reed, were both charged with involuntary manslaughter, and the maximum sentence there is 18 years. She received the maximum sentence already. So they're both facing the same charges, and she already got the max. So that might be an indication of what we can see moving forward. But to be clear, she provided the gun. She was the one who didn't make sure that there wasn't a live round on set, which is not supposed to happen. And she's the armorer. So this is really what she was in charge of. So I don't expect, if he is convicted, that he's going to get the max sentence.
Let's talk about Baldwin's defense. How is that shaping up?
Well, basically, that's the whole point that they are saying, pointing to Hannah Gutierrez-Reed.
Right.
There should not have been a live round on the set. Period. End of sentence. That is what they're going to say, and that it was her responsibility to make sure there wasn't. and she's already been convicted. So he was never aware that there was an actual bullet in this gun. He was told that the gun was cold, meaning not a live round in there, and there shouldn't be a live round on set, period. Now, according to prosecutors, he did fire a blank towards a crew member earlier in the process. So they're basically saying, and you can get injured, even if it's a blank.
Right.
So they're pretty much saying that regardless of the fact that it was a live round and it shouldn't have been there, that he should have been responsible. But his defense is going to say not his responsibility.
I am curious about the armorer, Hannah Gutierrez, of course. She's appealing her conviction on the same charge of involuntary manslaughter. What role is she expected to play in Baldwin's case?
Well, she's on the prosecutor's list as a witness. They intend to call her to the stand to discuss exactly how this went down on set. And she's been trying to fight through the court system to not testify out of fear that any testimony she could give under oath could impact her appeal. She didn't, of course, take the stand. So when you're looking at a situation where you're on the stand under oath, having to say, yes, I did this, no, I didn't do this, and then have an appeal saying it wasn't my fault, there are some issues there, but we do expect her on the stand.
And I know you'll be following the case next week. Caitlin Becker, thank you.
So it's some of the issues, of course, the overall big issue, and when we think of this, the whole case is it's recklessness. So Hannah Gutierrez Reed, we already know she got convicted of being reckless, and she was the one that loaded that gun, and she was sentenced to the maximum for criminally negligent homicide of 18 months. David Halls, who you see on the screen right now, he pled guilty but was given a sentence of 6 months for his plea bargain. Now, everyone sort of expected that this case would not go forward as a criminal case, that it would be more or less handled in civil court as a civil matter, and that, does it rise to the level of criminality? And I think many of the things that caused this to become a criminal case perhaps was the fact that Alec Baldwin had gone on many TV shows, almost as it seemed almost like as a infomercial, trying to sway the court of public opinion. But does that really matter? The court of public opinion. The only thing that matters is the real court, not the court of public opinion. So I think that in itself, the fact that he was a producer, did fire the gun, whether he says he didn't pull the trigger or not, the FBI ballistics experts in their test determined that he in fact did pull the trigger based on their test, that this gun could not have gone off without a person, and this person was Alec Baldwin, pulling the trigger. And if he didn't pull the trigger, there was absolutely no way that this gun could have went off. But I think one of the things that sort of made the prosecution move forward was the lack of taking responsibility for his role in this case. And I think that's what made them go forward with this case in both Hannah Gutierrez Reed and Alec Baldwin. I want to play this interview. This was the interview, of course, the famous interview with George Stephanopoulos.
Marker, good.
Great.
More fun?
Alec, thank you for doing this. You haven't said much in public since that tragic accident. Why speak out now?
Well, I think that there's a criminal investigation. That could be a while. There's all kinds of civil litigation. And I felt there were a number of misconceptions, most of it from sources I really wouldn't concern myself about, but a couple that I did concern myself about, where there were these authoritative statements about this is what happened. The sheriff's department hasn't even released a report to the DA yet. The reason I wanted to sit down with you is because I really feel like I can't wait for that process to end in February, March. I mean, I'm not asking them to speed it up for my benefit. That's ridiculous. But I am saying that they're going to do what they need to do. And I wanted to come to talk to you to say that I would go to any lengths to undo what happened. I would go to any lengths to undo what happened.
I think the big question, and the one you must have asked yourself 1,000 times, how could this have happened?
Well, there's two things I want to say about that. One is that when I talk about this, my concern is that I don't sound like I'm the victim, because there is a victim. There's a woman who died, and my friend got shot. He's my friend, and she was a new friend. I met her, and we worked together on some of the mapping out of what we're going to do on the film, which, you know, in the movie terms, if you go make a movie with Scorsese, you and the DP don't sit down and they solicit your ideas of how to make the film. You know what I mean? In the case of Helena, we sat down collaboratively and talked a lot about what we wanted to do in that a precious amount of time we had. But I want to make sure that I don't come across like I'm the victim, because we have two victims here. And the second thing is that all of what happened on that day leading up to this event was precipitated on one idea, and that is that Helena and I had something profound in common. And that is, we both assumed the gun was empty, other than those, dummy rounds.
I want to get into more detail on the day in a minute, but let's take a step back. What was it that drew you to this project in the first place, to Rust?
I'd worked on a project with Joel before.
Joel Souza, the director.
Right. He did this movie, Crown Vic, that I produced. And Joel and I stayed in touch. We're friends, and I loved Rust. He said, I want to send you this. And I read it, and I said, I love it. I love it.
Rust, a low-budget Western, tells the story of an aging outlaw on the run with his young grandson. Baldwin.
Well, this part really doesn't matter. What really matters is whether or not, the whole set, the set that we're talking about, the movie set, Rust, what was going on in that set and what led to this tragic shooting. And again, I don't doubt this was 100% an accident, but accidents sometimes happen because of potential recklessness. And there were many reasons. One of the reasons is this person on the screen right now, Hannah Gutierrez-Reed, who they proved during her trial that she put a live round in this gun. I mean, that's horrific. And did she do it on purpose? Absolutely not. But when this person, Helena Hutchins, you see on the screen now, wound up losing her life because of this, does it matter whether it was an accident or not? That's called recklessness. And this man on the screen, Alec Baldwin, he was a producer. He was supposed to be partially in charge of safety and training. And he himself shirked his responsibility in regards to the training that he was supposed to have and the safety meetings they were supposed to have in regards to this film. And this man, David Halls, you see on the screen, had previously been on a movie where there was an accidental discharge. So he had, in his past, some bad marks in regards to this. Greg Shirk from the chat, he's a lawyer. I wanted to get in front of the report to DA to manipulate public opinion, and solely the jury pool didn't pull the trigger. Indeed. Nina Chandro, doesn't he have a lawyer? If so, why is the lawyer not shutting him up? He's going to taint the jury pool, and then we'll make it a quick verdict and making him guilty. Nina, I shouldn't say I'm positive, but I'm pretty sure that his attorneys would have told him to not do all of this public relations and these TV appearances he was doing in regards to this case, because it only made him look more unsympathetic in regards to not taking responsibility to what happened on that movie set. And that's a fact.
That was the first time you met?
First time I met Helena, yeah.
What was your first impression?
When I met her, I knew she had that spark. I knew she had that flint to her, that she was going to get that day's work done and get the shots that she wanted. She was very focused.
She had a vision for the
She
film?
was very focused. We had a discussion about compositions of shots in which you were shooting these beautiful tableaus of the West. She had that intensity. Every day you went to work, she would say, "Good morning, how are you? How was your evening?" Boom, it was small talk, go. We weren't going to hang out and chit chat or whatever. She knew that the clock was the enemy and we have to move forward.
Once on set, Baldwin posts this video.
I want to say, I look at myself in the mirror, a reflection of this, and I'm really kind of appalled. It's appalling. But we're here shooting the film. We start tomorrow. And no, I'm not playing Santa Claus. On the 12th, I had a safety demonstration with Hannah Reed, the armorer.
24-year-old Hannah Gutierrez Reed, seen here in photos by the DailyMail.com, was hired as the film's armorer, in charge of all weapons on set. The daughter of a famous Hollywood armorer, Rust was only her second film in this role. She spoke to the Voices of the West podcast about working as lead armorer for her first film before Rust.
I was really nervous about it at first, and I almost didn't take the job because I wasn't sure if I was ready, but doing it, it went really smoothly.
We spent an hour and a half shooting the pistol, her giving me all her safety instructions.
Did you think she was up to the job?
I assumed because she was there and she was hired, she was up for the job.
But I mean, when he just said that, I assumed that because she was hired, she was up for the job. But isn't it his role as a producer to sort of vet the people that work on the film? And I know he didn't take any responsibility in regards to that, but the title producer means a lot of things. And one of them is to take responsibility for the safety and for the supervision of the set. And I know it's probably a difficult thing to wear two hats, the movie star and also as a producer, but I think that is part of his job as producer.
Nothing she did raise any red flags with you?
No.
Okay. This training course you do, what did she tell you?
She said things like, remember, this is a blank round, so you have to create the discharge yourself because there's no projectile. So if you shot the gun, you go bang. When we roll the camera, you got to go bang and have the gun will snap back. You have to create that. She would give you little tips about firing, and she'd say to you, when we're done, point the gun down. When we're done, you give the gun to me or to Halls, only those two people.
Dave Halls was Rust's assistant director, also known as the first AD. Seen here in this IMDb photo, he was responsible for keeping the production on schedule.
Sometimes we would be on a set that was a very, very cramped set, and they wanted people in that room on an as-needed basis. If I'm holding the gun and they say cut, I then hand the gun to Halls if she's not there.
Yeah, why Halls, not Hannah? Some people have said that only the armorer should be handling
No.
it.
That's inaccurate. Meaning in the protocols of the business, meaning Hannah would to hand me the gun 99% of the time. No, whatever the preponderance of the time. But when
I think it's been said, and again, I'm not a movie expert, but the gun should only be handed to the armorer. And the fact that Hannah Gutierrez Reed handed the gun to David Halls, who in turn handed it to Alec Baldwin, that was a violation of protocol. And even though Alec Baldwin is saying that that's not the case, that she can give it to the AD, well, things went wrong, you know. And we always go back, and I've done this show with Mike Geary and Phil Grimaldi, all of us NYPD veterans. And we all go back to the firearms range because that's where we're trained, the firearms range in the NYPD. And after you shoot and holster your weapon, what the range officer says, lock your gun to the lock position, slide lock position, and do a physical and a visible inspection of your gun to make sure that it's empty. If protocols like that were followed on this set, they would have never had this problem. Forbidden Planet, what was the armorer's salary for this movie? Did they pick her because they could pay her the least? Forbidden Planet, yes, that is accurate. She was getting paid I think like $7,000 something, which for a month-long movie set is basically not a very good salary. Nighthawk 08, why would they be live rounds on any movie set? I'm just really curious how this is even possible. So scary. Nighthawk, you're not the only one. Everyone, that is the question that everyone has. Why were there live rounds on this movie set? And ultimately, Hannah Gutierrez-Reed was responsible for that. And based on her responsibility, she got 18 months in prison after being convicted of criminally negligent homicide. This gentleman, David Halls, also was responsible. He handed the gun to Alec Baldwin, and he said cold gun. But does that exonerate Alec Baldwin of all responsibility because another person on the movie set, an assistant director, said cold gun, and you're going to take that as gospel without doing your own physical and visual inspection of that firearm? You know, the definition of a firearm is any loaded weapon that is capable of firing a projectile. So as much as people say this was a prop gun, this was a firearm. This obviously was capable of firing a projectile. That's what it did. It fired a projectile that killed the Helena Hutchins, the movie's cinematographer. I'm going to play this from court television.
On October 21st, 2021, Alec Baldwin was filming a Western movie entitled Rust in Bonanza Creek, New Mexico. Baldwin was rehearsing a scene with director Joel Sousa and cinematographer Helena Hutchins. Baldwin was seated in a church practicing a cross draw with a .45 caliber revolver. As Baldwin practiced pulling the weapon from the left side of his body with his right arm, the gun discharged. The bullet struck Helena Hutchins and Joel Sousa. Sousa survived, but Hutchins did not. An investigation into what was happening on the set revealed some shocking circumstances. Investigators say they found 6 live rounds on the set, including some in a photo with the woman in charge of gun safety, 24-year-old armorer Hannah Gutierrez. Additional live rounds were found in a box marked dummy rounds. How could this happen? Why did this happen? Tonight, we'll take a look at what was going on the set of Rust. How many safety rules were being broken, and what did Alec Baldwin say the moment he found out that Helena Hutchins died? We'll take a look as we continue our investigation into the Baldwin movie shooting.
There is no doubt that yes, this was a shooting. Someone was shot from the criminal negligence of not just one person, but several people. And this man on the screen is one of them. And as much as he wants to exonerate himself from that, he's involved.
Turned a bit by talking to him. So I think she was hit in the right armpit. But this is all I know, and that is that I take the gun out in the rehearsal. He wants it very dramatic and very kind of sneak up on it. I take the gun out, and as I take, like as it clears, as the barrel clears, I turn and cock the gun over here. I turn and cock the gun goes off. But I draw the gun slowly and aim off camera, and there supposed to be nothing in there. So she's not protecting herself and standing off. I'm shooting in a direction, and everybody is supposed to be to that side of the camera. There's nobody in my line. Nobody. And so when I shoot the gun, so in the rehearsal, I'm assuming I have an empty gun, and the gun goes off. She's right in front of me. Mm-hmm. She's as far from me as I am from difference between maybe you and the door.
Okay. So pretty close proximity.
It was a very tight shot.
Okay.
The shot was here. Of me, not of me, it's of me pulling the gun slowly, turn cock.
Okay.
And she's right there, vulnerable, in a position she wouldn't ordinarily be if we were shooting. And this gun, boom, she hits the ground.
So at that point of the interview, he doesn't know that she's passed away. So just so you understand where they are in this whole process. But he's speaking freely. You notice he doesn't have a lawyer with him at that time. He is just giving his account of what happened here, which, again, everyone agrees this was not on purpose. This was an accident. The question is this an accident that is a crime? Now, there's also been civil litigation associated with this case. And in one of those lawsuits, one of the parties put together an animation of the shooting. We're going to show it to you. One part we skipped through where they show some blood, but you'll see this recreation, this animation that was put together related to the civil litigations, so you get a better idea of what's alleged to have happened here. So there you see that single bullet trap.
I mean, very, very dramatic watching that. I mean, again, there's no one here, no one anywhere that's saying that this was anything but an accident. But there are things called criminal negligence, and this is a criminally negligent homicide. Folks, this is Police Off the Cuff, real crime stories. If you like real crime, true crime from a police perspective, then you're in the right place. And if you're not subscribed, go on our YouTube, hit that subscribe button, give us a thumbs up and ring that bell. If you want to contribute to us, we have a Patreon with 4 different levels, and we also have a YouTube channel membership with, count 'em, 5 different levels, and you could be part of our YouTube family. Kami from the chat, thank you for a $2 super sticker. Much appreciated. So this case, again, not to go over it, but the big issue here, of course, is criminal negligence. And as we know, many people, some of the camera crew, quit the day before because of safety issues. And not just safety issues, but I think that part of the safety issues were that whenever you take a movie and try to make it a cut rate situation, perhaps you're not getting the best people. Could that be the circumstance with Hannah Gutierrez-Reed? I think it absolutely was. This is the EMS people on the scene of this shooting.
Is anybody allowed to go with her in the helicopter? No.
Helena, deep breath, Helena. There you go. Deep breath, Helena. Deep breath.
Be okay.
Good girl. Okay.
There you go. Good girl.
Charge down.
Deep breath.
You don't know where the bird is right now. Can you find out?
Yeah.
EMS removing her by helicopter. Very dramatic. Actually, first time I've seen
it. So this bullet traveled through. Basically, Helena Hutchins was standing somewhat like sideways, was struck under the armpit. It went through her chest area, out her back, and entered the shoulder of Joel Souza, who it did a great deal of damage to. He's lucky he's not paralyzed. This is Joel Souza on the screen. So just all of these things, they're going to determine whether or not this equals criminal negligence. And there are other legal issues, of course. I mean, early on in this case, it was thought that plea bargains were going to be offered to all the criminally responsible people, Hannah Gutierrez-Reed, David Halls, and Alec Baldwin. However, I think it was determined by the district attorney, with seeing all of these appearances that Alec Baldwin was making and the lack of remorse and the lack of taking responsibility, it was determined that this is a criminal case, not just an accident.
A deadly firearm.
The Alec Baldwin manslaughter trial. Live coverage begins Monday morning only on Court TV.
So it's this case again. We have to look at one of the big legal issues, and I just thought of this, is that in all the testing that the FBI did, all the ballistics tests, for whatever reason, they did they pounded the gun with a mallet and it rendered it inoperable. So might that be a reason that the defense says, well, you can't even produce the evidence. How can we possibly test it to see if it is in fact operable or inoperable? So that's a good point. Could the judge rule in favor of the defense in regards to that? Yeah, I think that's a possibility. However, this judge, who is the same judge who sat on the case of Hannah Gutierrez Reed, ruled that no. The judge's name is Judge Mary Marlowe Summer. She ruled no. This case is going forward. They did all the tests on this gun, and they determined that this gun was in fact operable, meaning that it fired. And if the only way it could fire was if you pulled the trigger. Anyone that knows anything about firearms knows that the gun doesn't just go off by itself. A gun like this can go off quite easily because it's in single action mode, cocked back. Very little pressure. I think 2 pounds of pressure is necessary in order to provide enough pressure to fire that gun. And that is, in fact, what occurred here. I'm going to play part 2 of Alec Baldwin's interview, not the whole thing, obviously. Showing the Rust movies on October 21st, 2001. The Bonanza
It was
Creek
the 12th
Ranch.
day of their 21-day shoot.
That day, I did exactly what I've done every day on that movie.
Baldwin was preparing for his next scene, a shootout inside this wooden church.
Set the scene right before that happened. You're sitting in a pew in the church.
Right.
What's the scene supposed to be?
The scene is the two guys are there who have got me, cornered, and they think I'm shot pretty bad, and I'm kind of wilting, and they have a gun, and the sound outside distracts them, and I then draw the gun, cross-draw out of my holster, pull the gun up like that, and start to cock the pistol cut. I'm handed a gun, and someone declares, they said, "This is a cold gun."
Dave Halls?
The first AD. In my years on the sets of film, hot gun meant that there was a charge in there, and cold gun meant there was nothing in there. When he's saying this is a cold gun, what he's saying to everybody on the set is, you can relax. The gun is empty.
That's what cold gun means.
Well, cold gun means there's no charge in there. There could be dummy rounds.
A dummy round looks like a real bullet, but is completely inert. It contains no explosive charge.
And you were rehearsing that scene. Was it an actual rehearsal? There's some disagreement about that, whether it was a formal rehearsal at that time.
This is a marking rehearsal where I'm going to show her. She's standing next to the camera. She's like this, you're me. She's got a monitor here. The camera is here filming that way. She takes a monitor that is his monitor, the operator, and turns it toward her. It swivels, and she says to me, hold the gun lower. Go to your right. Okay, right there. All right, do that. Now show it a little bit lower. And she's getting me to position the gun. Everything is in her direction. She's guiding me through how she wants me to hold the gun for this angle. And I draw the gun out and I find a mark. I draw the gun out, I find a cut. And what's really urgent is the gun wasn't meant to be fired in that angle.
So if you're shooting directly into the camera lens, you're not aiming.
I'm not shooting into the camera lens. I'm shooting just off.
Just off.
Right, in her direction. I'm holding the gun where she told me to hold it, which ended up being aimed right in below her armpit, was what I was told. I don't know. This was a completely incidental shot, an angle that may not have ended up in the film at all. But we kept doing this. So then I said to her, now in this scene, I'm going to cock the gun. And I said, do you want to see that? And she said, yes. So I take the gun and I start to cock the gun. I'm not going to pull the trigger. I said, do you see that? She goes, well, just cheat it down and tilt it down a little bit like that. And I cock the gun. I go, can you see that? Can you see that? Can you see that? And she says, and then I let go of the hammer of the gun and the gun goes off. I let go of the hammer of the gun and the gun goes off.
At the moment.
There is sort of an admission. He lets go of the hammer and the gun goes off. However, ballistics experts would tell you that That's not possible. If he let go of the hammer, his finger would have had to be on the trigger for it to go off. And that's the bone of contention. That is a lot of this case. Nighthawk 08, thank you so much for the $9.99 super sticker. Thank you, Sergeant Bill, for your coverage on Alec. He needs to pay for his crew and set. He's in control. Thank you, Nighthawk. Much appreciated. So is that the $1 million question? The $1 million question. Did he or did he not pull the trigger? And I think that the answer, if you believe the FBI ballistics experts, is that yes, he absolutely pulled the trigger. And maybe he doesn't even realize he pulled the trigger, because 2 pounds of pressure when the gun is cocked is a very, almost no pressure to make that gun fire. Forbidden Planet, I don't think Reed handled the blanks or guns in a professional way. I believe that if somebody had the mindset they could have laid real bullets among the blanks, Reed was very lax. Forbidden Planet, no doubt. That's why she was convicted, and she's doing 18 months in prison. You know, that's the difference also when someone is sentenced to a felony, which is anything beyond a year is a felony. You go to prison. You don't go to jail. Jail is sort of like a holding center for misdemeanors and stuff. But if you get sentenced to a felony, you're going to prison for more than a year. So, yes, the big issue here is, did he pull the trigger? And that issue has been tested scientifically by the FBI ballistics experts. However, as I just mentioned before, the gun is no longer operable, because as part of the test they did to show that this gun, in fact, did fire, and it had to pull a trigger for it to fire, they somehow destroyed the gun. So that could be, of course, the defense team for Alec Baldwin will raise that issue. Well, where is the gun? Can we see the gun? This gun doesn't fire anymore. Well, that's because the test they did rendered it inoperable. So I don't think the judge is going to be that impressed with that. But some of the issues, of course, on the screen is Elena Hutchins. Hannah Gutierrez Reed, when the judge sentenced her, there were 6 things that she said that somehow some of these things apply to Alec Baldwin also. She never accepted responsibility. And in my mind, either has Alec Baldwin. She loaded weapon with dummies and a live round. That obviously does not apply to Alec Baldwin. She didn't check the weapon enough. We can all argue that Alec Baldwin should have also have checked the weapon, even though David Hall said it's a cold gun. But ultimately, when and if the gun goes off, who's holding the gun? Who pulled the trigger? Well, it's determined, according to the FBI, that Alec Baldwin did. Character attack on her. That's what Gutierrez Reed implied in her statement to the court after she was sentenced or was about to get sentenced. Alec Baldwin has been doing the same thing by going on all these TV stations and talking about how innocent he is. She was more concerned about herself. Can that also apply to Alec Baldwin? Because as we see this woman on the scene, Helena Hutchins, and there's her husband, Matthew Hutchins, who lost his wife, and a 9-year-old son who lost his mother. So all of those things, it's not impressive that you're more concerned about yourself when someone, in fact, lost their life. And yes, it was an accident. Absolutely. But to some accidents can be assigned criminality. And it has been determined in this case that there was criminality, that there was gross negligence, that there was recklessness. So the same charges and the same laws that applied to Hannah Gutierrez Reed may, and I'm not 100% sure they can prove it, but may apply to the film's producer and star, Alec Baldwin. It may. The sixth thing that the judge said about Hannah Gutierrez Reed was she was dismissive about what had happened. And I think we can also say that Mr. Baldwin also was dismissive in the way that he didn't ever accept responsibility for this. And perhaps if he had, maybe he wouldn't be in this position right now. Let's go back to the interview with George Stephanopoulos.
That was the moment the gun went off. Yeah, that was the moment the gun went off.
It wasn't in the script for the trigger to be pulled.
Well, the trigger wasn't pulled. I didn't pull the trigger.
So you never pulled the trigger?
No. I would never point a gun at anyone and pull a trigger at them. Never. That was the training that I had. You don't point a gun at me and pull the trigger. On day one of my instruction in this business, people said to me, never take a gun and go click, 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 because even though it's incremental, you damage the firing pin on the gun if you do that. Don't do that.
And Hall's attorney told ABC News that he was watching and agrees that Alec did not pull the trigger and that his finger was outside the trigger guard.
So you have this Colt 45, you just pulled
the hammer as far back as I could without cocking the actual.
And you're holding onto the hammer.
I'm holding that. I'm just showing. I go, how about that? Does that work? You see that? Do you see that? She goes, yeah, that's good. I let go of the hammer. Bang, the gun goes off. Well, everyone is horrified. They're shocked. It's loud. They don't have their earplugs in. No one was. The gun was supposed to be empty. I was told I was handed an empty gun. If there were cosmetic rounds, nothing with a charge at all, a flash round, nothing. She goes down. I thought to myself, did she faint? The notion that there was a live round in that gun did not dawn on me till probably 45 minutes to an hour later.
45 minutes to an hour?
Well, she's laying there and I go, did she get hit by wadding? Was there a blank? Sometimes those blank rounds have a wadding inside that packs, it's like a cloth that packs the gunpowder. And sometimes wadding comes out and can hit people and it can feel like a little bit of a poke. But no one could understand, did she have a heart attack? Because remember, the idea that someone put a live bullet in the gun was not even in reality.
Did you go up to her? Did you back away?
I went up to her and then we were told to get out of the building. We were forced to get out of the building. The medics came in. I mean, I stood over her for 60 seconds and she just lay there kind of in shock.
Was she conscious?
My recollection is yes.
911, what's the location of your emergency? We need an ambulance out at Bonanza Creek Ranch right now. We've had two people shot on a movie set accidentally. I'll connect you with medical dispatch. Don't hang up.
Director Joel Souza is also wounded. His shoulder hit by the same bullet that traveled through Helena.
When she went down, he went down and he was screaming really loudly. And I thought, what is he screaming? What happened?
So was it loaded with a real bullet or one? I cannot tell you that. Okay. We have two injuries from a movie gun shot. Okay. We're getting them out there already. Just stay on the phone with me. Okay.
Within 15 minutes or 20 minutes after that, the police arrived and took the church set and put the crime tape around it, the yellow tape, and forced us all to the perimeters of the parking area where we sat and waited. She was in the church, and she was not taken out of the church for quite a while.
In the aftermath, there was chaos and confusion.
But nobody told you what happened?
No. It wasn't until I was in the police station. Hours later, I mean, it was like seeing aliens. It was utter disbelief over the idea. It was unacceptable, the idea that it was a live round. And finally, one of the police officers at the conclusion of my interview, I was there for like an hour and a half or so, she takes her phone and she slides it across to me. She says, that's what came out of Joel's shoulder. A 45 caliber slug. It was a real bullet.
Had you known that Joel had been hit?
No one had any idea until that police officer, that sheriff's officer said to me, this is the slug, 45 caliber slug they took out of Joel's arm. And then the kind of insanity inducing agony of thinking that someone put a live bullet in the gun.
I mean, he absolutely has a point, right? Who would have thought that someone would put a live round in what was to be thought of as a prop gun. Who would think that? And who did it? Well, you're looking at her on the screen. She did it. That was determined through investigation in this case, that she in fact put a live round in this .45 caliber weapon. And that is the bone of contention for everything. We already know. She's already gotten convicted. She's convicted for criminally negligent homicide. The question is here, can the same thing happen to this man, to Alec Baldwin? Because ultimately, whether it was an accident or not, he bears some responsibility. He, in fact, according to the FBI, to the science of this investigation, he pulled the trigger. So this is from Crime Fix.
Heard testimony about that Colt .45 revolver that Baldwin was holding when he accidentally shot Helena Hutchins that day. Baldwin has maintained the gun just went off and that he didn't pull the trigger. FBI firearms expert Bryce Ziegler testified about accidental firearm discharges.
So, how is this gun designed in terms of safety with regard to possible accidental discharges when the hammer is in the fully rested position?
Right. So when the hammer is fully forward, as I mentioned earlier, the firing pin actually protrudes inside the frame. So if you have the cylinder fully loaded and the hammer is at rest on a chamber that has a live cartridge in it, that firing pin is actually sitting on the primer of that cartridge. So if I were either to strike the hammer or if I were to drop it and it landed on the hammer, it's going to fire that cartridge. So if you hit the hammer with enough force, it will detonate that primer in that position. And that's part of the design of this firearm. That's just how these are made. And if you were to look at the owner's manual, which this is one thing I did as part of my exam, you would actually see warnings not to carry this firearm with the hammer at rest on a loaded chamber. So a lot of times it's actually advised that you load one less cartridge in the cylinder. So you have one empty chamber, and that's how it's carried with the hammer forward on that chamber. So these are recommendations in the owner's manual. So this isn't some phenomenon. This is something that's known about the design of these firearms.
Ziegler conducted accidental discharge testing on the gun, which destroyed it. It's something both he and the Santa Fe County Sheriff's Office knew could happen, but that's a separate issue. Ziegler came to one conclusion about how the gun fired from the testing he conducted.
Did you form an opinion about whether the handler would have to pull the trigger of the gun to make the gun fire?
My opinion is that the only reason this occurred is because of the breakage. So in order to move the trigger away from the hammer, that's typically accomplished by pulling the trigger. So in this case, the only way that was possible is because the trigger actually fractured.
Okay. So in order for you, just so that we're clear, in order for you to make the gun fire without pulling the trigger, when it was in the full cock position, you had to break it.
That's what I had to do in my lab. I can't account for all the other possibilities that may have existed in some hypothetical scenario, but this is the result as I tested it in my laboratory. It would not fire without pulling the trigger in the full cock setting without being broken.
So that's not good for Alec Baldwin. He's basically saying that the trigger had to be pulled. Firearms expert Luke Haig also testified about the gun and how it was ultimately broken.
The piece that would fit into each one of those is the trigger. And the trigger is the black piece here, but the tip of the trigger in the industry is called the sear, S-E-A-R. That's the piece that goes in those three locations. And it really rests on this step when it's in the full cock position. So That's somewhat tenuous, and the pulling of the trigger causes it to slide off, the hammer to fall. There's a little piece in that circle I just drew. That's the broken off sear of the trigger. So it's an incomplete trigger. And finally, the object up here has two names. The company that makes this reproduction gun calls it the bolt, B-O-L-T. I've always called it a cylinder stop latch. It was the thing that was securing the cylinder in the safety position, in the full cock position, but not in the loading position. The left side of that goes up into the notches in the cylinder for those previous positions and drops down and allows the cylinder to rotate in the load position. So looking at those both photographically and in person, I could see that the full cock step or notch on the hammer was broken away, beaten away, or knocked away. Kind of hard to describe it if you don't see it under the microscope. And the sear was broken off. And the stop latch, the little wings, there's two pieces that protrude out. That also was broken. And the gun can't work in the normal fashion if it had been that way on the movie set.
Haig backed up the FBI firearms examiner's findings that the gun was working properly on the set and broken simply during that FBI testing.
What's your understanding of the circumstances of the blows you're talking about?
As I understood reading the examiner's notes and report, it was an evaluation of whether this gun was prone to accidental discharge by an impact to the hammer.
I want to take just a second to tell you about a great app.
So that was why they were doing that test. I mean, a lot of us would question, well, why did they render this gun inoperable? Why did they do this test if it could I think they were trying to show that the gun could not fire without pulling the trigger. That was the purpose. The entire purpose of the test was to show that for this gun to go off, the trigger would have had to been pulled. And that is a lot of the what this case is going to be about, and whether or not there was recklessness in regards to that. Pamela White, Alec Baldwin making excuses and denying any responsibility. I never pulled the triggers like saying in a car crash, the car did it on its own, even though Alec was in the driver's seat. Well, Pamela, I think that's somewhat of a good analogy, perhaps a little oversimplified. I don't know if we can compare it exactly for an auto accident. Amber Gloria, hello, I'm just hopping in. Was this after the FBI hit it with a hammer? Yes, Amber, yes, they rendered it inoperable, but they were trying to show that the gun would not fire even if hit with force. So they may be simulating dropping the gun to the floor. Misbelieving, hey, Bill, I'm a little late, but it's great to catch you live. Well, Misbelieving, welcome, welcome, welcome. So, yeah, I mean, this is going to be probably a circus of media. And I always like to remind everyone that this case really, when you think about it, is not about Alec Baldwin. It's about Helena Hutchins right there, who lost her life, and David Souza, who experienced a very painful gunshot wound to his shoulder. Who knows if he'll ever be the same after that. But is this a lesson to the whole movie industry? Maybe it's a lesson to the whole world that you must take firearms and the handling of firearms very seriously. And like they say, even cliche, don't ever point a gun at anyone unless that's the person you're going to shoot, if it's a deadly physical force situation and you're justified. Other than that, don't ever point a firearm. And whether someone tells you it's not loaded or not, you can't believe someone telling you that. You have to be the one, and I go back to the NYPD firearms range, do a visual and a physical inspection of your gun to make sure that it's empty. Other than that, can you really say it's empty unless you do that yourself? Barb G, always check the gun even when someone hands it to you. It's your responsibility to check it. Barb, I agree. Elizabeth Diane, Liz, do you think they should have tested it that way, or is there something else to test for that? I'm unqualified to make that determination. I am not a ballistics expert. I've never heard of this test being done before, but again, I am not a ballistics expert, so I'm unqualified to answer that question. Forbidden Planet, Alec's lawyer needs to start giving him advice about not dropping this. Oh, come on. I shouldn't have read that. Spacey, this is just a tactic to force the hand of politics to remove our constitutional rights. It's pretty simple. Look, I think that movies don't need to use live guns. There's other ways they can put the sound in after the fact. They don't need to use a live gun. So, folks, this case is going to start. The trial is going to start Tuesday, July 9th, and that may just be to pick a jury and go over some other things. But I want to thank everyone for coming by today. I know it's Sunday. It's still the 4th of July weekend. This case perhaps isn't as popular as some other ones, but I think it's important that we cover it and we understand what's going on here. This will probably get a great deal of national and international media. And if it shines a spotlight on firearm usage on movie sets, perhaps this will give the industry a lesson of what and what not to do. Anyway, folks, thank you for tuning in today. I'm Bill Cannon from Police Off the Cuff, Real Crime Stories. Have a great rest of your day, and God bless.
One episode just ain't enough.